Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 20th, 2020 Town of Islip Planning Board meeting. This is our second attempt at holding a successful planning board meeting Zoom. If you're joining us now, I'd ask you to please mute your mic unless you're speaking so that there's no background noise at home. If you'd like to speak on an application, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A function. If you're on by video, please click on that Q&A function, put in your name and the application that you'd like to speak on and whether or not you're the applicant or would like to speak during the public portion, and we will label you so that you can speak during the public portion. If you're on the phone, not to worry. During every application, I will ask anybody if they'd like to speak, and at that point, you can hit the *9 function on your phone, and that will go ahead and let us know that you'd like to speak, and we'll call upon you to speak. Speaking for members of the community are limited to 3 minutes. We'll let you know when those 3 minutes are getting close to being up. Some housekeeping items for this evening's agenda. Item number 6 and item number 7, Rover 2014 LLC has been adjourned. It will not be heard this evening. So if you're here for that application, it will not be heard this evening. And item number 7, Trek Bayshore LLC, that item also will not be heard this evening. So with that, we're going to get going if everybody's ready. It looks like everybody labeled. Again, if you just joined and you would like to speak, please go ahead and hit the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and let us know what application you'd like to speak on, and if you're the applicant, or if you'd like to speak during the public portion. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome again to the May 20th, 2020 Town of Islip Planning Board meeting. Hopefully everybody is and their families are home and safe and healthy during this pandemic that we're facing right now. We're glad that you could join us this evening and that we can carry on the business for the people of the Town of Islip. I just want to do a roll call of board members that are here so that we know who is here this evening. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Bruno?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Ruggieri?
Here.
Mr. Mattermore?
Tim, you're muted.
Here.
Thank you. And Mr. Moriarty?
Here.
Thank you. So we have a quorum. All members are here. I wanted to start by thanking Anthony Musumeci, who was a former member of the board. His last meeting was the last meeting. He served the residents of the Town of Islip well, and we thank him for his service to the planning board and to the residents of the Town of Islip. And I'd like to also welcome our newest member to the planning board, Inez Cruz. Welcome aboard, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Me too.
Right to the agenda. Item number 1 on the agenda is planning board application public hearing. Roxanne Trella, PB 2020-012, south side of Anthony Lane, number 30, 300 feet north of James Lane, Holbrook. Applicant requests to maintain existing encroachments in a required 25-foot rear yard buffer per filed map number 8692 and the respective covenants and restrictions. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services with offices located at 1040 Terry Road, Ronkonkoma, New York, agent for the applicant. We're here today requesting to maintain an existing encroachment into a 25-foot rear yard buffer. More specifically, to maintain the existing pool and pavers and sheds in its current location. The pool itself maintains 24.5 feet instead of maintaining the 25-foot buffer. The pavers encroach 10 feet, leaving only a 14-foot buffer. I would like to add that this encroachment is exactly where the diving board is situated. There are also 4 sheds located within the buffer, each shed having 10, 8, and 2 at 4 feet from the property line and within the 25-foot buffer. I would like to point out that although the sheds are within the 25-foot buffer, they do maintain privacy shrubs and are surrounded by greenery. In constructing the pool, pavers, and placing the sheds, the property owner was not aware of the buffer covenant. When the community was constructed on Anthony Lane, it seems that only this property and its direct neighbor to the west had covenants placed on the property concerning the buffer. These covenants are not listed on her certificate of occupancy, nor were they on her survey when she had the property surveyed. At the time of construction of these homes, there were no homes behind her property. Today, there is a home directly to the south. The buffer touches their rear yard, and exactly where the two properties touch, that neighbor has placed an in-ground pool and sheds of their own. We do believe that this relief would not create a detriment to nearby properties, and had that buffer covenant not been placed, the sheds, pool, and pavers would be in compliance with all of Town of Islip zoning regulations. I did attach pictures of the pool, pavers, and sheds for the record, but I do have them here in case you need to see them on the screen. And at this point, if the board has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Trello. We're going to go to public comment, staff report, and then we'll come back for any questions. I do not see anybody listed on here who is asked to speak. If you joined late and you'd like to speak on this application and you're on video, if you would hit the raise your hand feature, and we can allow you to speak right now. If you're on the phone, please hit *9 on your phone and we can allow you to speak on this application. Not seeing anyone indicate they'd like to speak on this application, I'm going to turn to Tanner Gonzalez to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This residence AA zoned 0.38 acre property is part of the map of Captree Greens in Holbrook, a major subdivision which was filed in 1989. The existing single-family residence was CO'd in 1990 and is currently the same owner, I believe. This lot, which is number 15, the adjacent lot 14 directly to the west, and lot 2, which is further north, are subject to a 25-foot rear yard natural area buffer along the property line. Lots 14 and 2 appear to have fully compliant buffers based on available aerial photography. According to the same aerials from the county, the subject pool and patio began appearing in 2001. However, I would defer to the applicant on when that was constructed by the owner. In the same aerials, sheds started appearing in about 2004, with now 4 present on the property. A certificate of compliance permit from the building division was applied for in 2018. Per the attached plot plan prepared by Dynamic Expediting, a portion of the pool, patio, and the 4 sheds are all located within this 25-foot buffer. These items were not initially flagged by the zoning division in December of 2018 as part of that certificate of compliance permit. However, in December of 2019, zoning did find additional records which showed the required 25-foot rear yard buffer and subsequently had to deny the permit on those grounds. Although not listed on the CO for the property, the buffer is stated on the property deed and should have come up in any title search if one were ever performed during the purchase. On a related note, variances for prior construction additions to the dwelling had to be obtained as well, which were granted by the ZBA in 2019. The sheds should be relocated out of the buffer if possible, as well as a portion of the patio. However, the pool itself at this point may not be able to be altered. Staff is open to suggestions and comments by the board in order to find common ground for acceptable conditions. Additional infilling of buffer plantings may be necessary depending on the current conditions. I know Ms. Trell had spoken about the screening that was surrounding the sheds. So if any photography could be submitted to staff for review, and we can go over that. That way we can review anything submitted by the applicant. So based on this, staff recommends the board reserve decision and discuss any potential options in order to draft suitable conditions.
Thank you, Tanner. Mr. Frajari, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. It's just more of a clarification. This deed restriction was placed on this property by who? Was it the town board or planning board?
It was the planning board at the time when the subdivision was approved.
Okay, so that's what gives us jurisdiction to make a decision on this tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions from board members?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Brown.
Yeah, Tanner, there's 4 sheds that are on the property, and town code would permit under 140 square foot 1 shed, correct?
So in order for a permit to be required, the shed has to be over 144 square feet. So based on the plan, I'd have to zoom in and see what size the sheds are. But anything over 144 would require a building permit. Anything below that does not require a building permit.
Right, and we can assume more than one shed would probably be above the 144 square foot.
If I can just interrupt for a second, I apologize. It actually for the building permit, it would be over 144 square feet, or if there is more than one shed on the property. She did apply for the additional 3 sheds and paid the applicable permit fees. And she passed all of her building inspections. Basically, we made it all the way up until they were typing up the CO. And when it went back to zoning is when this covenant was flagged.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, anything further on yours?
No, I'm good.
Any further questions from the board members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Bruno?
I'm curious, what are in those sheds? What's the use of these sheds?
There were one of them is for pool equipment. One of them is for gardening. Basically all lawn mowers, things of that nature.
Are there pool filters in one of these, for example? In other words, the larger, it appears there's, 3 of them are 49 square feet, so they're 7 by 7, but the larger one is 94 square feet. Does that one have pool equipment in it, or what is in that shed?
The filter itself is not in there, but the rest of the pool equipment is in there.
Just the maintenance items. In other words, they're not really, there's no fixed equipment in that shed, though.
No, I don't believe so. I would have to get clarification from the owner.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from board members? Not seeing any. Ms. Trella, you heard the suggestions from Mr. Gonzalez in the planning department in terms of possibly the pool staying, maybe the pool and the patio staying, but the sheds being moved. I'm just wondering if you or your clients are amenable to any of that.
So the pool and the pavers where they're situated, that little bump out that goes into the buffer is exactly where the diving board is. So the diving board covers that entire paver area. It doesn't extend further from the diving board. That bigger shed, it is on a concrete slab, and it does have, their pool equipment in it, and it has the least amount of encroaching into the buffer. So if that could possibly stay where it is, the other sheds, the smaller ones, they are, like the Home Depot plastic sheds. I'm sure I could speak to her to see if there's any way that she could move them on her property. And I will get him the picture. She does have those very tall privacy bushes, arborvitaes and such. So there is a very big buffer. There's a lot of greenery. Basically, the only portion of her house that doesn't have greenery or bushes is the pavers around the pool.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask Mr. Matamore.
Yes, I have a question for Roxanne. Did I understand you to say that the subject of the sheds has gone to the ZBA as well, or not?
They don't require ZBA. They are, because they're of the size of them, they would only require a 2-foot side yard. And the one that has the least amount of the rear yard is at 4 feet. So it's more than adequate with the town zoning codes.
I see. It appears, and it's a rather unique mix of streets, the way the streets are designed. And the only neighbor that seems to be most impacted would be the one immediately to, I guess that's southwest, with the pool on Lambeth Street. And I was curious whether or not there has been any opposition, because that's almost the only one that's really strongly impacted by the location of the sheds. And you can't probably see them from any street, which I think is a factor. It's not a determinative factor, but it's something that perhaps can be considered as these covenants are amended and or written in order to accommodate as much as we can. I personally don't think that trying to do anything with the pool makes much sense. The sheds are a different subject, but it certainly would be relevant I think if the neighbor immediately to the south had objection to it, and not hearing one tonight, I assume the answer is no, but you may know otherwise, or there may be letters in a file or something that we don't know about. If that neighbor doesn't object, it would lead one to believe that these encroachments are not detrimental to her property values or to his or her quality of life. Do you know anything on that subject?
I do know that the property owner did speak with the neighbor. They did not, from what I was told, I did not speak with them directly. There was no objection because right behind the sheds on our property is where they have their sheds. So, you know, they have the same exact thing on their property. And then the neighbor to the west of us is a completely wooded area owned by the town of Islip. So there's no neighbor on her other side.
So the property to the west doesn't go all the way back to the same property line. That wooded area you're saying is owned by the town.
She has one neighbor to the west of her, but that property line is the only other along with hers that has a 25-foot buffer.
Right.
But their property is almost double the size of ours. So they have the same pool, the same shed in the same locations as us, but because their property is bigger, they didn't need to go into their buffer.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I can see that now.
So they also don't have any issue with anything staying where it is.
Yeah. I'm as a comment, and I drove there today. You can't see any of this from Anthony Street.
No, you can't.
And it's a factor. It's not necessarily determinative, but it's a factor. So as far as the detriment to the neighborhood or the neighbors and not hearing any, I think that's at least something that can be factored into the forming of whatever conditions planning staff recommends. Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. Mr. Gonzalez, can you just explain to everyone the purpose of the restrictions there?
So essentially with every new major subdivision in the town of Islip, there is a requirement for essentially 20% natural area for the overall development, as well as a 5% park area. Those two usually get lumped in as a 25% requirement because a lot of these subdivisions aren't large enough to kind of have a pocket park. So you can look at it as a 25% landscaping requirement, basically, that should not be touched and left alone. So usually we try to put those, in one spot, or depending if it's not a clustered subdivision, they'll usually be along the rear property line of all these lots. So essentially that's what you have. 25 feet off the rear yard property line is a natural buffer that was supposed to be left, undisturbed.
Thank you for that. So, Ms. Trella, I think at this point, we'll let you get the pictures over to Mr. Gonzalez and have a discussion with him to see if something can be worked out that's amenable to everyone. And then we'll bring it back before the board and hopefully get this resolved.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I had another question.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Yes. Tanner, what percentage with the patio and the one shed, what percentage does that take up of the buffer?
Are you referring to the larger shed?
Yes, the one with the pool equipment.
I would have to take a look at that. I could get back to you as far as you're basically just looking about percent occupancy, basically just for the buffer area.
Well, if looking at leaving the patio where the diving board is and one shed that encroaches where the pool equipment is, if the other ones were removed, what type of encroachment then would they have on the buffer zone?
I can zoom in. So it looks like the larger shed is about maybe 8 feet and change off the rear yard property line. So that's as close as it's to the back. So it encroaches probably I guess 14 or 15 feet in there.
Okay, thank you.
Moriarty, do you have a question?
No, I'm fine at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Anything further from the board? Mr. Trello, would you like to add anything further?
Just one thing, I did email you, Tanner, a picture of the shed. I just wanted the board to get a good look at it. I don't see my camera on, so I can't show it, but the sheds are literally placed in between bushes. Like they're completely surrounded by greenery. And I just wanted to see if they could get, like a full picture of what the house is like. She didn't necessarily clear the land or anything like that. There are all trees and bushes and everything surrounding these sheds. They're hidden. The three small ones in the back, I actually went to the property myself today and I couldn't even see them.
Let me see if I have the pictures right here. Let me see if I can bring them up on the screen.
Mr. Trello, you can't get your video to work, or you're not in a location that it'll work?
No, I'm on a computer, but here it says start my video.
There you go. Here we go.
So if you can see that.
Right about there's, yep. Okay.
That's the bigger one, Roxanne?
That's the biggest shed, yes. And I do have, this is a picture of the, so behind those big bushes is where the three smaller ones are located. So you can't see them basically from her house and then she has a privacy screen right up to her fence. You can't see them from the rear neighbor either.
Thank you.
And these are the, just to get here, I found this one here. There's a small shed right here. And it's not really visible on either side.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Treller on the photos that you just saw? Not seeing anything else, Ms. Treller, you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jarrett.
You know, visibility is one concern to take into consideration, but listening to Tana's explanation for the purpose of the natural open space as a buffer, visibility isn't the only concern. You know, I could see a justification for granting some leniency here and permitting certain things to stay. But I think whatever arrangement is arrived at, we need to draw some kind of line in the sand and determine an appropriate, area for a buffer in this location. Only because if you take a look at the neighbor next door, they're in substantial compliance. And if they decided to also breach into their buffer area, then we lose a considerable amount of natural open space.
Thank you, Mr. Frugier. I don't know what it is, but often the point I was just telling Sean I was about to make was that one, but thank you for always covering for me. Ms. Trell, any comments back, or you're okay?
I'm okay. Yes, I'll work out I'll speak to Tanner.
Okay, thank you. Anything else further from the board? Not seeing anybody's heads moving in the up and down motion or any hands raised. Oh. Your motion.
I would move to close the hearing and reserve decision this evening.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the hearing and reserve decision. It looks like Mr. Matamore is seconding that motion. Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstention? We're reserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Anybody who's joined us late, please be aware if you'd like to speak on a specific application, you can hit the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen in the middle and identify what application you'd like to speak on, if you're the applicant or if you're a member of the community who would like to speak, and we will sign you up to speak for that one. If you're dialing in by phone, not to be worried, we will we allow you to speak during the public hearing by hitting *9 on your phone at that time. So at this point, I'm going to go to application number 2. Item number 2, Planning Board Public Hearing, Millennium Gas, Hacker AK, PB 2020-013, southeast corner of Patchogue Holbrook Road, County Route 19, and Woodside Avenue, County Route 99, Holtzville, 325 Patchogue Holbrook Road. Applicant requests a modification of Planning Board special permit conditions associated with PB 2006-042 in order to increase the square footage of the convenience market. Site plan modifications may be requested as part of this application. Good evening, is the applicant here?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Michael Williams, principal at R&W Engineers PC, offices at 380 Town Line Road, Suite 150 in Hauppauge, New York. I'm looking at the screen. I can assure you that I am not that good looking. That's my wife. This is something new to me, so trying to set the video settings. So I would pop up, but while I'm trying that, oh, there it is. Well, again, like I said, it's something new to me, so I'm just going to start talking to the application. This application is for a special permit to modify conditions that were set forth in 2006 prior to my applicant owning the property. We had applied for him for a building permit to modify, to make an interior alteration of the square footage of the retail space interior work only. When it went to the building department, it came to a halt because of the special conditions that were set forth. That's what this application is for, is to modify the special conditions. The applicant is seeking to increase the size of the retail space inside his building to 648 square feet, which is presently closer to 300 square feet. Primary purpose is to install a walk-in cooler along an entire wall. The plans are already in with the building department, as I mentioned, for approval, and it's pending further action based on this hearing and approval. We do have in front of us conditions that were provided to the planning board as a set of 14 conditions. The only thing, my applicant did say he was amenable to all the conditions. The only thing that jumps out at me is condition number 9. Applicant agrees to submit elevations to the planning department for review and approval. He's not looking to make any exterior changes to the building, so I don't know if that's actually applicable. Other than that, I'm here to respond to any kind of questions you might have or from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to a staff report. I'm going to go to public first, and then we're going to go to a staff report, and we'll come back for questions. I'm going to go to Diana. Diana, if you'd like to speak, just unmute and you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, we're on Diana.
Hello, can you hear me?
Wait, we unmuted the wrong person. We're going to go Diana first. All right, Diana, are you both on a phone and video, or is that two separate people?
Are you able to hear me?
Diana, are you on a phone and your computer?
Hello, are you able to hear me?
That's better.
That's
Go ahead.
better.
We can hear you. Go ahead, Diana. Diana? Diana, I think you must have had your audio through the phone. If you're going to speak through the phone, you can do that, but then you need to mute your computer so there's not feedback.
Hello.
I can hear you.
We can hear you. Diana, can you hear us? Yeah. Diana, if you want to call back on the phone, you're unmuted. If you want to call back on the phone, then you need to just mute your computer and you can speak on the phone. Diana, I'm not sure if you can hear us. If not, I'm going to. If you can hear us, once again, just mute your computer, turn off your speakers there, and you can go ahead and speak on the phone instead. We'll allow you to dial back in. Dial back in. What we're going to do is I'm going to go to a staff report, and if you can get back on, Diana, when you come back on, we'll allow you to speak at that point. So I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak right now for a report, and then we'll come back to you if you can get back on by phone. Thank you. Ms. Wozniak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the southeast corner of Patchogue Holbrook Road and Woodside Avenue in Holtzville. The property is currently CO'd as a gas station, repair garage, and convenience market. In 2007, when the property obtained the special permit for the convenience market, conditions limited the size of the store to 338 square feet. In October, plans were submitted to the building division for an interior alteration, and floor plans showed the convenience market had increased in size to 648 square feet. The increase in size of the convenience market does not seem to have any adverse impacts, as the site has adequate parking and the rest of the conditions imposed in 2007 can still be met. Planning did receive a letter from a nearby property owner stating concerns with lighting and signage at the subject parcel. Planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which mimic standard conditions imposed today for convenience markets and includes conditions which address lighting and signage at the property.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. I can see that it looks like you're back on. Is that you at 7744, if we allow you to talk on there?
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, hi. So I kind of lost my thread here. Was there a specific question, or am I just supposed to explain what my concerns are, or how does this work? It's my first time attending one of these meetings.
You have 3 minutes basically to express any concerns that you have with the project, or if you have any questions, you can pose them to the board. We'll take them down and try and get them answered later.
Okay, all right. So basically, there has been more recent to their initial communication that it's an interior only modification. And so it sounds like they're trying to expand some cold cases, probably to serve alcoholic beverages. Can I get that confirmed?
Well, I'll ask the question. Go ahead with your part, and then we'll come back to the questions. I'm writing them down.
Okay. So my concerns are this. Obviously, you know, they want to increase their square footage so that they have more area inside where they can derive revenue. I'm obviously concerned about my property value, and so we both have revenue concerns, but also, you know, just my day-to-day enjoyment. You know, I put up a taller fence to try to mitigate some of the lighting that shines through my household windows. I spent also thousands of dollars on planting trees to try to get rid of the blinking lights. And it just seems that I plant trees, I put up a higher fence, and then they make their lights and their awnings higher, even still. So it seems like anything that I do, and now that light is available, you know, is visible through additional areas of my property. So I feel like because they're a business, they can kind of do whatever they want, but I'm limited to a 6-foot fence. And I'm just, I just feel like there has to be some consideration for residences. I really don't think we need a gas station or a convenience store there, but it's there, so it's there. These folks, they want to earn money, they want to earn a living. I get that. I don't want to deny anyone that, but there are convenience stores everywhere. But is there a way that they can do it where I don't have to worry about sordid activity taking place? Are they going to buy things there, and then the folks that buy things are going to cross the street and then use them in the woods right behind my house, possibly creating harm to either myself or to my property or anything like that? You know, I don't understand the need for it in that area. But my bigger concern is that the impact it will have on my property value and my safety, and what can be done to mitigate those issues.
Thank you. We will work now and ask some of those questions and try and address some of those. But thank you for calling in and calling back in so that we can get your comments. We appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Wozniak or to the applicant, first, is there anything square footage wise of the structure itself is remaining the same? Or is that okay? And then in terms of, do you currently now sell alcoholic beverages? Are you currently selling them? And if not, do you plan on adding that?
I am not the applicant. I would presume, based on other convenience markets that I've seen within gas stations that he does sell alcoholic beverages.
Currently sells it?
I would presume that he does, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then, is there anything changing in terms of the awning, the lighting outside, or the actual, I was referenced the blinking light? Is there anything that's being changed or has been changed as part of this application?
Nothing was proposed to be changed outside. As part of the special permit conditions that were laid out, one of the conditions speaks to lighting, condition number 11. If there are lighting conditions which are outside of the town of Islip's regulations, he would be required to address that. We don't have a lighting plan. He was not planning on doing any lighting, anything different. This is the first that's come to my attention that there was stray light off the property.
Okay. Ms. Wozniak, can you just speak to the lighting, and if they wanted to make changes to lighting, as obviously none of them are part of this application, what restrictions there are in town code in terms of lighting?
Yeah, so I took a look at the property on Google Street View, and I didn't see any LED lighting strips or blinking lighting. The canopy, which is the closest portion of the building to Diana's home, didn't have anything that's outside of what the town code permits. You know, the canopy face isn't lit or anything like that. There's no illuminated sign along that portion. So I'm not really sure what she's talking about, because I didn't see anything, but as the applicant mentioned, they have to meet town code as far as light trespass and stuff like that. So if that is a concern, you know, maybe someone could go down to the property and take a look at it before they issue the CO.
Ed, you're muted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm talking to myself.
Right.
I said, Ms. Wozniak, so you can actually go ahead and make the request that somebody can go out there from planning and engineering staff to take a look at or is it code enforcement to look at whether or not the lighting is meeting standards as per the town code?
Yep, I could do that.
Okay, so we can take care of that. Anything else from members of the board? Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, Kelly, I just have one question. I took a look at the covenants conditions, and I didn't notice anything in there about landscaping obligations of the applicant. Is that intentional on our part? Is that, or is that, don't we typically impose that for these kinds of approvals?
So this application didn't involve any site plan modification. Site plan modifications, which is usually like the percent landscaping. It's meeting the percentage of landscaping and things like that. It's an existing property. It's not a new site plan. It's literally just interior work. So typically that landscaping standard language you see is involved with like a site plan modification application, which this doesn't involve any of that. The site's basically staying the same. All the work's just interior.
Although I'm raising it in the context of the objections being raised by the neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a neighbor that's spending significant amounts of money putting up shrubbery and fencing to try to block some of the or address some of the complaints that she was raising. I was wondering if there's some way for the applicant to incorporate some sort of mitigation on that to accommodate the local neighbor. That was my thinking.
If I may, Mr. Moriarty, the property kind of sits on its own little island. It has a wooded area to both the east and the south, which is town of Islip property, and then it's bordered by County Roads 99 and 19A. The Diana, who was speaking before, I believe her property is on the opposite side of County Route 19A in a development.
Okay.
So typically, and speaking to landscaping buffers, those are typically imposed when you have commercial property bounded by residential zoning.
Madam, do you have a question? No. Off. Any other
do.
questions from, oh, Mr. Bruno?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Williams, looking at a picture of the building that I have and looking at your site plan, the building's made up of two pieces. There's the hip roof piece and then apparently a flat roof piece. And the flat roof piece right now is the part that has the auto repair in it, correct?
I
That's what
believe
it
that's
looks like.
correct, sir.
And it looks like it's 3 bays of, where there's 3 overhead doors. And it looks like from the area you have hatched, that basically you're giving up one of those bays that's going to become part of the convenience store. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so then you are going to be doing some exterior work because you've got an overhead door there now.
Oh, that's correct. It's going to get closed up.
Okay, so I mean, there is some, I can see the reason for some elevation review there.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, and is the, and I just want to see, and the other 2 parts, that's going to stay the auto repair part?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing was raised, you know, it deals with people loitering and the rest. I know when we talk to some of the 7-Eleven applicants now, they have cameras outside, no loitering policies, they enforce them. Are there cameras outside your client's establishment? Do they have a no loitering policy? Is that enforced?
I could not answer that question whether there's cameras, but we will, that's part of the conditions. So he will be compliant with the conditions when all is said and done before he is issued a certificate of occupancy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from the board members? Mr. Williams?
I have a question.
Ms. Cruz.
Is there across of Patchogue and Holbrook Road, is there stopping and standing on that wooded area for cars? Because she raised concerns about that. If the people were in the convenience stores, if they buy something, can they stop there behind those houses?
No, so again, she's on the opposite side and it's a divided highway, County Route 19A. As I believe County Route 99, it's a very tricky intersection where there would be no southbound traffic allowed off Woodside Avenue. It's all northbound. So other than that, it's all curbed. So there is no, other than his 2 driveway cuts, there's no ability for somebody to pull off the road and sit on the side of the road.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Wozniak, is there a standard condition here that deals, I see on the loitering? Can you just cover that quickly for us? So it's item number 5.
Yep, of course. As Mike first said, they have to install security cameras on the property, and then they also need to post signs outside of the building that says loitering is prohibited. And if complaints are received, if people are loitering, you know, on a normal basis, and the town does receive complaints, the board does have the ability to revoke the special permit if it becomes a consistent problem.
Okay. And then I'm not sure in reference to where a member of the public's house, the community member's house was, but there is a crosswalk a little further down to get across the street. Is that correct? Woodside and Patrick Holbrook Road. I just wanted to clarify that on the record. Okay. Is there anything further from the board? Anything further from Mr. Williams?
I'm actually getting text messages from the applicant. They said this is all kind of new to everybody. So it's kind of encryptive. He's saying light and canopy never change. I guess he's making a statement that it's not changing. And he also says we don't want to take the garage. So that might speak to the exterior elevations, but well, we'll certainly, if there are any changes to the exterior, he's closing the garage, Mr. Bruno will get elevations over to the town.
Okay with you, Mr. Bruno?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and then the key point I just wanted to point out in relation to the questions and the concerns from the Diana was that the last part of loitering does say the planning board reserves the right to hold a public hearing to consider revoking the special permit, terminating the special permit if neighborhood complaints are received. So if there are founded complaints, there is an avenue for us to go back and look at this. That being said, Mr. Williams, anything further?
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Anything further from the board? Not seeing anything, I'm going to turn to, oh, Mr. Matamore.
Just before you call for a recommendation, I need to recuse myself on this application. I'm familiar
The
with it.
record, Mr. Matamore has recused himself on this application.
Thank you.
That being said, Mr. Bruno, you're the one on my screen right now. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to grant the application subject to the covenants and any other items that Mr. Williams and Ms. Wozniak need to work out.
Motion by Mr. Bruno to grant the application subject to the covenants as well as any others that Mr. Williams and Ms. Wozniak may work out. Is there a second to that? Second by Mr. Moriarty.
Yes, it is. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Granted. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good evening.
Again, if you've joined us late here this evening and you would like to speak on an application, please hit the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and we'll identify which application you'd like to speak on and we'll allow you to speak during that application. If you're on by phone, not to worry. We'll ask during each application if you'd like to speak and you can hit the *9 on your phone. And once you hit the *9 on your phone, it'll let us know that you'd like to speak and we'll call upon you to speak during that application. Next application on the agenda is Town Board Application Public Hearing, M&H Brothers, Inc., CZ 2020-006, southeast corner of Brentwood Road and Candlewood Road, number 0, Bayshore, 0, Brentwood Road. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence B to General Service T in order to construct a mixed-use building. A front yard landscaping relaxation is requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I wish you all safe and keeping out of this problem that we're having. On this application, I will have Mr. Joseph Clemens give you all the details because he's the architect involved on this detail. Mr. Clemens, please.
All right. Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German and Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. First and foremost, I also sincerely hope that each of you, along with those close to you, have remained healthy during this unique pandemic. I know this is kind of new to everybody. I'm speaking to you this evening in regards to the 0.84 acre parcel situated on the southeast corner of Brentwood Road and Candlewood Road, property tax map number 0500-202-04-039, located in Bayshore. This application proposes a change of zone from Residence B zoning to GST or General Service T zoning to allow for the construction of a mixed-use building. General Service T is so named because the T stands for transitional. The intent of the zoning is to allow limited commercial uses on a lot between commercial uses and residence, similar to the situation we have here. The subject parcel is currently a vacant wooded lot. As indicated, my clients of M&H Brothers, Inc. are requesting to enhance this site with mixed-use building. Specifically, the proposal is for a two-story wood frame building with a ground floor area of approximately 3,325 square feet, comprised of commercial office space. The second floor of approximately 3,000 square feet would consist of two two-bedroom apartments and one one-bedroom apartment. The building would have typical residential finishes, including horizontal siding above a brick or stone base and pitched roofs. The Brentwood Road elevation would more closely resemble that of a residence, while the visible elevation from Candlewood Road would have more of the commercial elements, such as storefront entry systems, which front the provided parking area. The parking has been situated within the rear yard to the greatest extent possible. Adequate number of parking is provided per our original proposal as well. However, after discussions with the planning department staff, 5 of the required 22 parking spaces are proposed as land bank to provide more green space. The site plan has been strategically designed to efficiently comply with the GST zoning requirements as well as the required Town of Islip land development regulations. The total FAR, or floor area ratio, proposed is 17.4%, well under the allowable 25%. The proposal set forth also complies with the zoning criteria as it relates to area density, width of lot, and required setbacks. The height of the proposed building is approximately 29 feet. less than the allowable 35 feet per residence AAA district requirements. Almost 60% of the site is landscaped, 3 times the 20% requirement, including a 25-foot landscape buffer, which contains a double hedgerow of evergreen arborvitae and trees placed every 20 feet on center, along with a 6-foot high fence, chain link fence, and attached stockade to protect the neighbors to both the south and the east. To clarify, 18.8% of landscaping, excluding the buffer, is within the front yard area and therefore complies with the land developmental regulations. I am unsure if a front yard landscaping relaxation is required as stated in the public notice. As you can see from the plan set before you, my client simply wished to establish and maintain a property of which conforms to the town of Islip requirements while providing something which contextually fits in with the surrounding area. There are other commercial uses along Candlewood Road, more specifically directly across the street from the subject parcel as an example. The improvements requested will become a benefit to the community and enhance the aesthetic. New street trees and continuous yew bushes will be added, which will enhance the look of the site and conform to the town of Islip standard. This will be a vast improvement from that of the existing wooded lot. As such, we would respectfully request that you recommend this change of zone so that my clients can convert this overgrown wooded site into a pleasant neighbor, and we can continue to enhance the Bayshore community. At that point, it concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. We'll come back for questions in a little bit. I do not see anybody who has already indicated they'd like to speak. If you've joined recently and you'd like to speak on this, can you hit the raise my hand feature at the bottom of the screen? Or if you're on the phone, could you hit *9 on your phone now to let us know you'd like to speak on this application? Not seeing anyone who'd like to speak on the application, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application proposes rezoning a vacant residential property at a signalized intersection for a mixed-use building with office space and 3 apartments. The town had identified the front yard landscaping relaxation on an earlier version of the site plan that the applicant had submitted before this hearing. Subsequent revisions have been made to eliminate the need for the relaxation, so the staff recommends that the board modify the call to reflect that and that no front yard landscaping relaxation is needed.
Thank you. Questions from members of the board? Not seeing any at all. Anything further from you, Mr. Clemens?
No.
Mr. Clemens, do you know who would be going in there in terms of types of use?
No, at this point, like I said, it's designed for office space on the first floor. If anything was to change or if any use was proposed other than that, depending on what it was, it would require, assuming we would get an approval, that I would have to come back to the planning board if they wanted to do anything different from that. They're not allowed to have retail uses as per the zone, so that's null and void. The only other item that may potentially occur, which wasn't discussed, is a minor restaurant, which then modifications would have to be made, or a service establishment such as a barber shop or a nail salon, which would also require me to come back to your department or board for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Colgan, are there any specific types of uses in there in the office space use that would be more problematic that we want to have them come back on, or is pretty much all okay?
Mr. Chairman, I think medical uses would probably put a strain on the parking demand.
That would be true.
Yes, medical offices, in addition to any sort of restaurant uses, might generate a little more traffic than what we may be accustomed to for a general service T type of property in this specific location. So some consideration may want to be given to limiting some of those more not well trafficked, but more traffic types of uses.
Thank you. Mr. Matamore?
I think the application has merit. I'm concerned about the access going out to Brentwood Road and left-hand turns being made from that exit. So I would like to at least have planning review whether or not it should be, if someone has to go south, that they should go out to the light at Candlewood Road. And I noticed immediately to the north is the Jehovah's Witness facility, and they have a sign there that they don't allow the entryway or exit to Brentwood Road to be used Monday through Friday during business hours. As we all know, Brentwood Road is already heavily traveled and congested. So it seems to me that perhaps no left-hand turn out of the southerly exit to go south, it wouldn't be much of an inconvenience. There's much less traffic on Candlewood Road, and going out to the light should be relatively easy to accomplish and not delay the owners or the patrons or the customers or the residents who may live there. So with that in mind, I think it's a good application, but I'd like to make sure that that's looked at because of the heavy traffic on Brentwood Road, which unfortunately is constant and has been for years.
Thank you, Mr. Madden.
Thank you.
Ms. Clemens, that'd be something that we'd ask that you speak to Mr. Colgan about when you speak to planning staff. Mr. Madden was raised some good issues there that affect traffic on Brentwood Road and how bad it is now. Maybe this would help alleviate some of those issues.
That's fine.
Any further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No.
I wanted to know
No question, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question.
Ms. Cruz.
What's across the street from on Candlewood? What kind of businesses is that building?
Directly across the street, as Mr. Matamore had said, is the Kingdom of Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, that's the Jehovah's.
That's directly across the street, and then catty corner to us, if you're looking, I guess, northwest, there's like a shopping center, a retail
shopping center.
area.
And how many, well, it depends, I suppose, of how many businesses on the bottom of the apartments? Would it be one, or it depends on what you're?
That hasn't been designed yet. I think right now we had shown 3 separate spaces, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, right now we were showing 3 separate commercial business areas, but realistically, depending on what the applicant goes, somebody can rent 1 space, somebody can rent all 3 and make it just a single tenant space. Realistically, I guess it wouldn't really have much impact on parking unless there was a medical office, which, as they said, would have a higher impact. But realistically, whether it's a standard office use or 3 separate office uses, it wouldn't impact parking so much.
Thank you. Any further questions? Not seeing any. I will turn to Mr. Brown for either hopefully a motion, if not a question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing and reserve decision.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Fuggiari, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were reserved. Thank you. Once again, if you joined us later and you're on the phone, you'd like to speak during the next or any of the, actually, that was our last public hearing. So there are no more items to speak on. So we're going to go to the next item on the agenda, which is a major subdivision bond reduction. Diopuli, hopefully I said that right. I don't think he's here, so I don't have to worry about that. MS 2013-004, west side of 3rd Avenue, 1,156.34 feet north of Sunrise Highway, Bayshore. Applicant requests a surety bond and cash bond reduction in connection with the previously approved major subdivision. I do not see the applicant here, so I'm going to go right to Mr. Gonzalez for a report. If the applicant is here on the phone, would like to speak, hit *9, but if not, Mr. Gonzalez, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the applicant will not be present tonight to my knowledge. So this application was last heard on September 16th, 2018 for the acceptance of a continuation certificate. At this time, over 75% of the work has been completed, and this project is eligible for a 50% surety and cash bond reduction. Engineering inspections have confirmed the work percentage completed, and the town engineer has authorized the reduction. The surety bond will be reduced from $87,970 to $43,985, and the cash bond from $8,497 to $4,248.50. A new surety bond shall be submitted, and the appropriate funds of the cash bond will be released through the comptroller's office. Based on this, staff recommends the board grant the reduction of the 2 bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Not hearing any or seeing any. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Chairman, I can make a motion to grant, subject to the conditions with the reduction of the bond, with the amounts that Mr. Gonzalez stated.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application, subject to the conditions stated by Mr. Gonzalez. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's approved. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, Planning Board decision item, Da Vinci's Pizza Restaurant, PB 2019-028, northeast corner of Grundy Avenue and Donald Boulevard, Holbrook, 1191 Grundy Avenue. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a minor restaurant in the Business 1 District pursuant to 68-272.1A to legalize an existing pizzeria. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Mr. Rubenstein, are you here on this application? Mr. Rubenstein, you're muted if you're.
Sorry, I just. There
you go.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Michael Rubenstein. I'm agent for the applicant. My office is at 1070 Middle Country Road, Suite 7, Selden, New York, 11784. As you're aware, this is a continuation of the hearing originally held on September 19th, 2019. I'd like to thank Ms. Wozniak and Mr. Furman for their assistance in developing the current site plan. We're in receipt of the special permit and site plan modification conditions. We ran through them and don't appear to have any opposition to them. We took into consideration the concerns of the board at the prior hearing. We made the following changes to the current site plan. We reduced the square footage of the proposed building from 1,750 square feet to 1,600 square feet. The required parking, therefore, was decreased to 23 spaces from the original 27 spaces. We provided 16 spaces as shown on the site plan, and this was a request of the engineering department to increase the landscaping. Our minimum landscaping, the existing buffer will remain at approximately 34% of the lot, and there is no change. The total landscaping increased to 1,625.4 square feet or 7.3% for an increase of 5.3%. The front yard landscaping increased to 876.4 square feet or 4%, and we increased it by 2%. Street trees along Grundy will be 11. Several of them will be grouped, and 5 along Donald, which will also be grouped. I would like to make the board aware that the pizzeria is not typical pizza restaurant. Before the lockdown, the business was approximately 85% takeout. Now it's solely takeout. The customers that frequent the business are local. Most of them walk to the restaurant to take out pizza and bring it home to consume. On the rare occasion, there may be some that will grab a slice and sit down for a quick lunch or dinner. As part of the conditions, the restaurant does have a ventilation system, and it is approved by the Health Department Food Control Unit, and it has inspected periodically. The hours of operation are currently posted, and they will continue to do so. Elevations have been presented to the planning board. I think Ms. Wozniak mentioned that in her conditions. There is no directory signage proposed other than facial signage that is also shown on the elevations. Garbage cans are provided, and they will continue to do so. There's currently a dumpster enclosure with a hose bib. As far as the site plan modification conditions, we agreed to the conditions for the parking if substantiated complaints are received by the town. The bicycle racks have been proposed and are shown on the site plan. Additionally, the elevations have been submitted to the planning board. We will continue to work with engineering department to their satisfaction, and all existing plantings and vegetation will be maintained. We've been working My client and I have been working diligently to address the concerns of the board. We believe that the current site plan represents the best solution for the site. We will continue to work with engineering and planning to finalize the site plan and obtain all the necessary approvals and permits. Based on this information, we don't believe the granting of the application will have a negative impact. If there's any questions from the board?
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a report, and then we'll come back for some questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wozniak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the public hearing, the applicant has reduced the size of the proposed building by 150 square feet and has changed the use of the new building from retail and a takeout restaurant to all retail. This modification slightly reduced the parking relaxation from 33% to 30%. The overall and front yard landscaping relaxations remain substantial as 1/3 of the site consists of the required buffer, and the shallow depth of the site makes it difficult to comply with the required 8-foot landscaping strip along the street frontages while maintaining a parking lot. The most recent approved site plan on file from 2008 did not require any parking or landscaping relaxations. However, the new development on site requires substantial relaxations. The application before the board tonight consists of a special permit to legalize an existing pizzeria and the site plan modifications required for the construction of a new building. The pizzeria would not increase the required parking and should not create an adverse impact. Therefore, planning recommends the board grant that portion of the application subject to the attached conditions. The site plan modifications requested as part of this application are more concerning, given the fact that these are not pre-existing conditions and future uses may increase the required parking even further. Planning recommends the size of the proposed building be reduced to decrease the required parking and ensure the site does not become overdeveloped and create an issue in the future, as the site is located in a residential neighborhood with no room for on-street parking. If limiting the size of the building is not possible, the board may consider limiting the on-site uses. Unfortunately, there's no way to increase landscaping on site. Planning has drafted site plan modification conditions should the board feel comfortable with the parking and landscaping relaxations.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Bruno?
The problem with the landscaping, as I understand this, is because it's abutting residential and the landscaping that would exist is all buffer, and buffer doesn't count in the landscaping. Is that correct, Ms. Wozniak?
Yes, over 1/3 of the total area of the site is a buffer, so it's a lot.
What is the percentage of landscaping including the buffer right now? Do we know that?
Well, the landscape buffer is 34% and the overall is 7.3, so a little over 40% of the site's landscape.
Okay, so they have, I'm saying, it's not that they're not providing any landscaping, it's that we're saying that the depth of the site and the fact that it abuts residential, and I've seen this is a big common problem if you've ever been along some Suffolk Avenue. So that's what we're saying is causing the problem?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So my concern would be to what Ms. Wozniak raised. I mean, I agree with Mr. Bruno on the landscaping part. I mean, they have a significant amount there. It's treated differently, but my major concern would be the fact that it's a residential area and the new building that would be constructed based upon the size would require was it a 30% relaxation in parking, Ms. Wozniak? Right, so having that was, yes, okay. Having a 30% parking relaxation in the middle of a residential area for me is problematic. And so while I agree with Ms. Wozniak on the pizza restaurant or pizza place going forward with the approval, I do have concerns about the building and its current square footage going forward with that type of a parking relaxation. And I concur with my fellow board member, Mr. Bruno, in terms of landscaping. So I'm not as critical on that one based upon the fact that there is a significant amount there. It's just classified differently, but I do have a concern about the size of the building with the parking in a residential area. Mr. Brown?
Yes, and Kelly, do we have a site plan or something or a copy that we can look at? All what I have is I'm looking at the aerial, which shows a partial dirt parking lot filled with cars. And I'm trying to get a clear picture of the site and like to know where the building is going.
going to go ahead and share
I'm
screen.
okay, yeah, I was gonna try to share mine. Thank you, Sean.
Okay.
Do the applicant or Ms. Wozniak want to explain what's what and what's going up?
If you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can explain. So we're, at the request of engineering, Mr. Paul Furman, we reduced the square footage of the building from 1750 to 1600. As Ms. Wozniak indicated, we are changing it to an all dry retail use. We did also move the building closer to the existing building. We added that hatched area, which is an additional 749 square feet of landscaping. We do have the parking. I don't know if you're familiar with the existing building, but the existing building is a Ralph's Ices with a walk-up window. Nobody goes into the Ralph's Ices. And then 421 square feet is the pizzeria in question. And really again, depending on the use, and I believe it would be amenable to limiting the types of uses. We're not going to do any medical. There's not going to be any takeout or more intensive uses. We can make, we could certainly make that part of the conditions if the board so, would accept that. And like Mr. Bruno was saying, we're almost at 40% of landscaping. And the parking, I know it's at 30%. It did come down from the 33 we were originally requesting. There's really no opportunity to land bank any spaces, because then we'd be encroaching in the buffers in the landscaped areas again. And we felt after discussions with engineering that this was the best, the best site plan that we could come up with. We did reduce the backup spaces. He allowed us to reduce the backup from 24 feet to 20 feet. We did add bollards along the front in order to protect the building and the sidewalks. There's bicycle racks. So generally speaking, these are the items we did work with Mr. Furman in the engineering department.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
Yes, I'm curious. I'm just looking at this. It looks like this building, the proposed building, has a basement.
It will have a basement. Yeah, it's a utility basement.
Okay, so no parking has been allotted for that either?
No, it falls under, it's going to have a ceiling height of approximately 7'6", and it'll be strictly utilities and storage.
For the entire building?
Correct.
The entire understanding of the building, okay.
Correct.
While as you can see, I'm willing to be forgiving about the landscaping, right. I'm not as forgiving about the parking. I think that there's no room should a problem occur here. And I think perhaps at this point, while I agree that landscaping is one thing, maybe the building just needs to get smaller so that you get closer with the parking to the requirement.
I could take that back to my client and we could discuss it.
Yeah, that would be helpful for us. I mean, the planning staff certainly has raised that it is a residential area to see if the building could go down in size to accommodate that. As Mr. Bruno said, there is nowhere really to add parking if there is in fact a problem. Are there further questions from the board?
Just a comment, looking at the site plan, along the lines of what Mr. Bruno was talking about. If the proposed building was made a little smaller, that area that's hatched, that's right now slated for landscaping could be used as additional parking. If you just take one spot away, you could add several if there was more space in there, if the building was smaller. So that's something you should probably take a look at. You wouldn't be touching the buffer or any of that. As we said, if you count the buffer, you do have a sufficient amount of landscaping. It's the parking that really is the issue here. You should probably take a look at that.
Very good.
Any further questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to follow up with what I was speaking about, the look at the top view here with the site plan. This is replacing there was a lot of parking on the site, which this is much better layout and eliminates some of the parking that was right up against the residential behind it and that. But I do have the same concerns as Mr. Ferrajari and yourself and Mr. Bruno, that the building itself, maybe with a little bit of a reduction and some proposed new parking, would be an acceptable application.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Ms. Wozniak, do we need to go forward on the pizza part of this tonight, or is it drafted separately, or do we reserve on all of it to have the discussion?
I drafted it separately. If I didn't know if they were waiting for the CO, because like I said, the pizza place is existing and I know site plan takes longer. So if the applicant wants the pizza place granted tonight, there are separate conditions for that.
Mr. Rubenstein, do you need the pizza place granted tonight, or would you like to keep them together?
That's a great question. I think, is it going to affect the site plan application if we grant the pizzeria? And we can continue with the site plan application for the proposed building, correct?
Ms. Wozniak, I'm going to defer to you on that, or Mr. Colgan, or someone.
I don't think it would affect the site plan application. That's for the new building. The pizzeria is already existing. Correct? It's already operating?
Yeah, it's yes.
Mhm.
So we're okay then to go forward on the one?
So we can go forward with the conditions for the pizzeria.
Just have one question.
Mr. Ferrajari.
Yeah, what will kick in the additional landscaping, the street trees and the like? Is it the approval of the pizzeria or the new building, the site plan?
Ms. Wozniak?
The new building is what's requiring the site plan modifications. There already is an approved site plan from 2008 that didn't require any parking or landscaping relaxations, which they could go forward with just keeping the pizzeria if they dropped the site plan modifications altogether and didn't construct the new building.
So we would just be legalizing an existing use.
Correct.
If I may, so basically if they separate the two, they would have to come back before this board and to get any parking or landscaping relaxations. Is that correct? So the site plan could not move forward if that were the case, because it would have to come back before the board. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I think for the new building, the building to the north, because that's not constructed, but there is a site plan on file from 2008 for the building to the south that they could just go off of for the pizza restaurant.
Oh, okay. But the one they currently have in engineering that Paul Furman was reviewing would not be able to move forward.
Correct. Yes, they would need the landscaping and parking relaxations.
Okay.
So do we have a consensus here? We can move forward on the pizza, the existing, and we can reserve on the other, on the new construction. Is that correct? Ms. Wozniak?
Yes.
Okay. So that being said, is there anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Anything further from members of the board? Not seeing any. Who would like to take a stab at this motion?
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Ferrajari.
I'll make a motion that we grant the, or legalize the existing pizzeria use on the site and reserve decision on the proposed dry use retail building and the site plan.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to legalize the existing pizzeria use on the property and reserve on the, you say new construction on the site plan?
The new construction, the proposed dry retail use.
Construction to dry retail use. Are there any covenants and restrictions tied to this approval of the pizzeria, Ms. Wozniak?
Yes, that should be the first portion of the conditions. Numbers 1 through 7.
So then I'll amend my motion to make the approval of the existing pizzeria use subject to those 7 conditions.
Okay, so the motion by Mr. Frugieri to grant the application legalizing the existing pizzeria use subject to the covenants and restrictions, items 1 through 7, and to reserve on the new construction of the retail dry use.
Mr. Chairman, I would second that.
Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We are granted in terms of the legalization of the pizzeria. We're reserved in terms of the new construction. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Last item on the agenda is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Moriarty to adjourn, second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions were adjourned. Thank you all. Be safe and see you at the next meeting.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Night,
everyone.
Good night.
Be well.